I'm Indra.
And I'm Amanda.
And we'd like to welcome you to The Messy Middle Matters. Hi, Amanda. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Indra?
Good. Today we're talking about titles. It's something that comes up in the workplace all the time, and I've long understood how important titles can be in the workplace. But when I think about titles, I think about a specific scenario that came up in 2020 when 37 Signals released their new email platform called Hey. As part of the rollout, one of their big fans, they've got a huge following from the software engineering industry. One of their fans was a software engineer, it was a person of color, reached out to them and asked, when are they going to be adding email signatures to the platform? So DHH, who is their CTO and also created the tech platform Ruby on the development language Ruby on Rails, responded saying that they don't plan on adding signatures to the platform because they think they're divisive. This software engineer then clarified for DHH how important including his titles was in his email signatures as a person of color. In his lived experience, what he found was that when he did not include his title and credentials and anything that he had in his email signature for new emails and even the reply to emails, what inevitably happened more often than he would like is that the recipient of the email wouldn't take his word for what was included in the email and trust his expertise. They would look for validation from someone else. So, like I said, I always understood how important titles were, whether it's in email signatures, in HRIS systems, or on LinkedIn, but this was a new dimension for me. And so I'm really glad we're getting to dig in on this topic today.
Yeah, for sure. For all of the reasons you listed, titles are important, right? For HRIS, HR information systems, platforms, org charts in your organization. But also I view titles as a way to signal to others like what your credentials are and like how to interact with you. Right.
Yes.
Like, so, hi, I'm Amanda Lee. I am a director of something. Like that holds more weight than like, I'm just Amanda Lee. Like you don't know me from anything. Right. Like whether that's in the workplace, whether that's, on this podcast, whether that's in real life, like you don't know anything about me other than my name. Right. And your title is just one of those indicators that you can use to leverage your expertise and like to show others that you have these credentials, that you understand what you're talking about. You are an expert in this field, whatever it is, right? Like on LinkedIn, you see a lot of Amanda Lee, PhD of whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't have a PhD, but you see a lot of that because especially on a platform like LinkedIn, where you have a lot of weak connections, like weak ties, people don't know you and your credentials. So it's a good like headline.
Yeah, it's a useful labeling system. It's a useful like taxonomy, card cataloging, whatever you want to, whatever framework you're thinking of from your background is a great way. It's a shortcut. Mm-hmm. It's a great shortcut and it's a great reminder and it's a great billboard. And, you talked a little bit about some of these things. Let's talk a little bit about like the different types. Like, let's start at the beginning. Human HRIS systems, you said human resources information systems. These are the bread and butter of an HR department, your people teams, day-to-day business, right? It's where all the records are for all the employees of the organization, employees and contractors and other things too are in there, right? And when I think about it from an HR perspective, like I was at Verizon, massive company when there was a effort to standardize titles across the entire organization. I also was there, I've lived it a couple of times, but that's one of the more recent ones. And what they were trying to do with the normalization of the titles was to make sure that there was a clear mapping between levels across a whole bunch of different departments. Like you've got linemen people who are up on poles putting up lines that are in that system. You've got software engineers that are in that system. You have marketing professionals that are in that. You got so many different types of skill sets. How could they make sure normalizing the titles was a way to make sure that there was equitable compensation and benefits and everything across that entire ecosystem. So there is an important value to having those not so sexy, not necessarily resonant in your particular craft and field, but there is a value. There's a very important use case for why HR has such very dry and standard titles in those systems.
Yeah, dry is a good word, right? Dry is a good word to describe these titles because usually, especially at an enterprise organization, like thousands and thousands and thousands
Mm-hmm.
of people, like the easiest way to normalize that data is to say, you're a project manager,
Yeah.
you're an engineer.
Yes.
Whether you're an engineer, whether you're a software engineer or like one of the linemen on, on the poles, like you're still an engineer. Like this is the title that is going to map to your level, which maps to your pay, which maps to
Other benefits and all sorts
right,
of other
all of the other
things.
things.
Yes. Yeah. And whenever these exercises happen, what I tell my team is this is what's needed in the system. You don't need to put the same exact title in your email signature, referencing the story from the beginning, or on LinkedIn, as you talked about. Like there are different, you can use different language for these different scenarios, and there's good reasons for it. You don't want to be a fool about how you make them different than what's in your HRIS system. Like, don't declare yourself CEO or something.
Yeah.
But there is latitude. There is latitude to make sure that you're sending the right signals within your organization and your email signature, or to the larger ecosystem of the business world on a platform like LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think if it's helpful to clarify what you do and who you are, cool. Like add all of the color you want to engineer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it might be, let's talk about engineers. So, like, there's a whole difference between front end engineers, back end engineers, database engineers, SREs. Like, we could go into all the little whatever it might mean. Like, and for a large team of software engineers, it's really important to understand what someone's expertise is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hierarchy is one thing, what their expertise is another thing. And that's why they might add something like that in their email signature, or they might add like a subline to that. So, like, they might be signaling something to engineers across the organization. They might have some other line that's down there that really explains to the business person, like, I'm the person you reach out to for when the site is down. Right.
Right.
Maybe not those exact words. Like I'm sure that they have the right terminology, because words matter. Both you and I are wearing our words matter swag today.
Right.
Um, but there's different things that you can signal in that email signature.
Yeah. Just thinking from my own personal experience, right? My title was program manager in the HRIS system. And, usually in an email signature or, LinkedIn, I could add some more detail to that and be like program manager of what comes to mind is enterprise marketing management, right? These are the programs that I manage. So I'm
Yes.
going to signal to you that like, hey, if you have a question about any of these projects in my program, like I'm the one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As
100.
opposed to like you getting an email from Amanda Lee, program manager. Okay, program manager of what?
Of what? We say the word of what an awful
Yeah.
lot. Because words matter and clarifying questions matter too, right?
Right.
We have some very serious through lines. One day I'm going to throw all of our transcripts into into an AI and be like, okay, tell me our themes. Tell me our themes.
Yeah.
But back to the words mattering in the context of titles, I think that talking about the LinkedIn titles, like the LinkedIn title doesn't necessarily match your email signature, even because the titles in the broader industry of your particular craft may may be different than what's permissible or what's understandable within your organization or within your, sector of the world. Finance will be different than hospitality, will be different than straight tech, will be different than all the others that are out there.
Yeah, I think you hit an important point where like they don't have to match.
No.
Right? Like just because your title in according to HR of your company is program manager, it does not mean it's like illegal to add program manager of what to your LinkedIn bio.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people get nervous, like, when their titles do differ between the HR system and specifically LinkedIn or their resume, right?
Mm-hmm.
When there is that delta. And because the reality is that there will be future employers that call for an employment verification check. And sometimes what they will disclose is the title that was within your organization, right? But the reality of it is that any seasoned professional knows how to translate HRIS into what might be on your resume. So they can usually trace that. So, don't get freaked out like and go, and start to go on a campaign to make sure the HRIS system matches what might match your future employment. Have a little bit of faith in the system, have a little bit of faith in the people doing employment checking, have a little bit of faith in your future people managers or your potential hiring managers that they will be able to do that translation, which is where, again, you don't want to go completely off the rails in what that definition is, but you have a little creativity if you need to.
Yeah. And another thing is I have applied to jobs and, had these background checks done in recent years. And if you're worried about your background check coming back with a delta,
Yeah.
what I can tell you is most of these, if not all of these background check companies ask you to fill out a separate form. So if you're really that worried, on that form, you say whatever your HRIS title is, right?
Yeah.
And they're not going to pull up your LinkedIn or like pull up like whatever other credentials you have and match it to, the form that you submitted. And like, oh, wait, you put program manager here, but you put some other title here on LinkedIn. Like, I'm going to flag that.
It's not yes, I think that's a really good thing to point out. And the one thing that I would also say that's important to note is that the hierarchy of the titles and even the leveling across organizations can be really different in the context of titles. Like in some organizations, VPs are really high in the organization, and some organizations are in the middle of the organizations. In some organizations, VP and EVP, executive vice president, and president are not necessarily sequential. There's gaps and there's things in the middle, or directors are placed in different levels. So like have those when you're in those conversations with people from different industries. Don't automatically say, oh, you're a director, I'm a director too, cool, we're in the same level. You may or may not be. Like you really need to understand like the sphere of influence and the scope of what that person's job is, and ask those questions to really understand if there's a true analogousness between your two roles and two levels.
Yeah, I think the context of your organization matters a lot here, because you're right. Like in what comes to mind when you say VP and what VP means in different industries is that there are a lot of VPs, vice presidents in the finance sector.
Yes.
Whereas like at a startup, a VP sometimes reports directly to the CEO.
100%. 100%. I love that example. And, even within an industry, like let's go to the tech sector, there is a graphic that I love often. I love referencing from time to time is how the software engineering titles map across the big five tech companies. If we're talking about like the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, et cetera. They don't even all match up, right? They each have slight differences in their career stages, their career bands, everybody uses a slightly different thing. And even the titles within those, like what's a level 1, level 2, level 3 of a software engineer? It can be very different from organization to organization, the responsibilities.
Yeah. And so we've talked a lot about um, understanding
Yeah.
what your title means,
Hmm.
right? Especially in context of your organization and, outside in the broader scheme of things. Why why do they matter?
Why do they on a day-to-day basis at work?
Yes.
On a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis works. I think that, in that we talked a lot about the outside of the organization. We haven't talked about inside. Like,
Right.
you know, um, back to Verizon, I still remember massive organization. Um, there were some shortcuts that people would use to make sure that they wouldn't get overwhelmed with too many conversations and too much noise, because if they invited a conversation with everybody, they may not be able to get their day-to-day job done. And so there were some people did employ some shortcuts. Some people did employ some shortcuts where, they would really only interface with people at their same career stage. And that made sure that helped them keep moving their team and their team's work forward. So it wasn't necessarily dismissive, but what it did is it created some challenges so let's say I had a team member that understood exactly what they needed to have done, and they knew that sending the email directly to a director, excuse me, because they weren't at the director level, it wouldn't necessarily go anywhere. So what we did, the process that we had, is my team members say, "Hey, Indra, I've got something I need you to send."
Yeah.
They'd pre-draft an email for me. I'd take a look at it. I'd make sure that it made sense, that I stood behind what was there. And then I would send that email to that director because it was a shortcut. It was a necessary shortcut. Like when you look at it, you might think, "Oh my goodness, they're too good." Like, no, it's really not that. It's really that it's an organization of tens of thousands of people, more than that, but let's say tens of thousands of people, and making sure that your time is as well spent as it can be is really important. Is really
Yeah.
important.
I mean, even at organizations that aren't tens of thousands of people, like Automox, I'm pretty sure I was one of those people, Indra, of just like, hey, I think this is really important information.
Yeah.
I can post it in this Slack channel, but like, I don't know if it's gonna. I don't know if I have enough clout or weight, right? I think it would be more seen and heard and understood and received if and I think your title was director at the time, if like
Yep.
a director posted that.
Yeah. And so just to give you guys a sense of where the organization, so the team that Amanda and I supported was around, at its peak, was around 250 engineers. And so, yeah, so making sure that it had the right level of gravitas. It's not that
Gravitas, great
it's
word.
not that Amanda wasn't capable of finding the right words. She's much more skilled at the words than I am, in many ways. And so, yeah, sometimes she would do the same. She would pass me a message and I would post the message, or I'd send out the email, and then it would hit differently. It would hit differently and have a different impact. So understanding how to support the people below you, understanding how to leverage the people that are higher than you, and understanding how to create the pushback to say, "Hey, Amanda, I see why you wanted me to do this one. I think that, I need to reserve my clout, because it is a finite resource. If I'm posting absolutely every message, it's going to lose its value too. This
Right.
particular one, I've got another message that I need to send out and use my director title, you know, for this one. I think you need to post this one this week." And then maybe that's the way that you go, because you need to figure out like how and when to leverage titles and how and when to leverage your networks.
Yeah. And I mean, thinking about it from a recipient perspective, right? Like you are more likely to react to something that the CEO posts,
Yeah,
right? Like because titles do matter and they do hold some weight.
they do. They do. And I think it's about being smart about what you say. And I think that there's didn't think that we were going to go in this, my brain would go in this direction, but like, you need to be careful when you have that power. You
Mm-hmm.
can't, you have to understand the weight of your title and use it
Yeah.
well, and use it well and use it to the advantage of the greater good, in my opinion. That's how I choose to work on things.
Yeah, I didn't think my brain would go here either. But what came to mind was some people, like I've experienced people with director and above titles, we'll say,
Hmm.
um, setting an example unintentionally and like not the greatest example,
Oh, tell me
right?
more.
Of just like posting messages in the middle of the night because that's when they happen to be working.
Uh,
Right? That's when they
that's
happen to be working. And it's like, but you're saying you're in other forums, you're saying work-life balance is important. Log off when you can't, like you don't have to overwork yourself, yet this person with a title with weight,
yeah,
are doing the opposite
yeah.
and unintentionally using that weight to set a negative example.
Yes, I think it's a much bigger communications. Like we keep on saying, you and I are becoming communication. This is becoming a communications podcast.
Yeah.
I joke about
Yeah.
that all the time, but it's true. It's true. It's true. You don't know how that's going to. It hits differently when you do have that title. That title has weight, and it can shift your culture if you use it the wrong. If you engage with your team the wrong way at a certain status, it is a
Mm-hmm.
status thing,
Yeah.
and pivoting on the status thing, or just like riffing on the status thing, not pivoting, riffing. Um, I'm going back to the example of that person, that software engineer who was emailing the folks at Hey, I need an email signature. Pun intended. I don't know with my
Oh yeah.
overuse of the word
Hey.
hey.
Yeah.
It gets stuck in my brain, certain words every once in a while. But when you see a colleague and they do give you their full set of credentials at the top of the conversation, it's probably look at it for what it is. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself why. Maybe they do need to assert themselves for one reason or another. Maybe, their email signature is much longer than yours for a reason or another. Maybe your email signature is really short because that's what works for you in getting work done in your particular scenario, in your particular workplace culture. So, make sure you take a look at the context when somebody is um, leveraging their title and why they might be doing it.
Yeah, for sure. When you first told me that story of,
Ah,
that engineer
yeah.
and hey, I was just like, I know exactly why he's asking. I know exactly why he's asking about email signatures and being able to use his title, to use his credentials, right? Because like I'm an Asian woman, right? Like there are societal limitations.
Yep.
We'll call it that, right? And I need to show up in a certain way for people to take me seriously.
Right.
And I have a master's degree, right? Like, it was the path of least resistance at the time, but like I have a master's
You have
degree
a
and
master's degree.
I tell people that
Yeah.
because it is yet another way, like my credentials are another way for me to have more weight in the conversation or in the interaction.
Yeah. And for me, I generally have not relied on my titles. I'm a white woman. I'm a cis white woman, right? Um and for me that hasn't been for a whole slew of reasons. I've not leaned on my titles, right? As much. There are scenarios, I've given some scenarios here today, but for me that's not as much. And so for me, when I first encountered that story way back in 2020, I'm like, oh, that's why this person and 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 this person in my past had put down every possible credential in their email signature. Like, it turned on a light bulb for me.
Yeah.
Right. And it was
And
just,
like that's why Amanda, was such a pain in the butt asking about my title and what it was. And like, I'm managing people now. Like,
yeah,
is my title now officially manager? Like, can we change that
that's,
in the HRIS system? Or HRIS because that's the system.
yeah,
But yeah, like that's why I was such a pain about it because titles do matter, especially for someone like me.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this is a much bigger topic because I know, not I think, I know that for some, when they encounter people who flex their credentials for one reason or another, it can have an allergic reaction. Like, it's like, oh, what do they think that they're so special because they did that? Take a beat.
Right.
Take a beat.
Yeah.
understand that it's a fact. And maybe question, just reflect on, not question. Question sounds like you're going to have an active conversation with them, but just reflect on, like, why might that be the case? Why might be that the case? And maybe there's something for you to learn. Maybe there isn't some sort of flex. Maybe you just have never taken advantage. Like, I never took advantage of my titles the way that I should have until I hit certain organizations at certain thresholds. And then it was always in my signature because I understood that um, there was an advantage to that. And why not take advantage of that advantage of making things clear to folks so that I could engage in certain conversations?
Yeah. And I think there are some organizations that take titles very seriously,
Yes.
right? Like it's part of the company culture.
Or it could be a government organization or a
Mm-hmm.
pseudo military organization, or there's lots of different types of companies where titles really matter.
Right. Actually, it's interesting that you brought up military because that is an organization where titles really matter.
Really
There's
matter.
a hierarchy there.
And that's what keeps that machine going. That's what keeps that organization going. That's what leads to the success of that team, of that organization. I'm using more general terms just so that there's the paralleling. But yeah, there's value to that. And sometimes that makes sense. And some organizations some organizations love a flat culture. What is it, the teal organization? We can talk about those. That's a type of structure of an organization, which is based. Long and the short of it is that titles can flex based on current circumstances. So,
Oh, I've never heard of that.
oh,
When you said flat organization, I was thinking of, I think it's Netflix actually, that like
it's pretty flat.
that everybody is like a contributor.
Yeah. Some go that route, and some go even
Mm-hmm.
further, where your in a teal organization, your compensation can change based on your role at a particular time. So it's very radical in when you think of like a really traditional organization. But back to our topic of titles. They matter. They matter. Make sure you understand them contextually. Make sure that when someone is using their title, you reflect on what they're trying to signal and why they're trying to signal it, and see how it can apply to you. See how you can apply and show up in a different way by adjusting your title, by adjusting even the font of your title if you're talking about email signatures. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many pieces to it.
Yeah, I think that's another theme of our podcast, right? It's not just a communications podcast, but it's also a um lead with curiosity, right?
Yes.
When you see something that you're like, huh, like
Huh.
go a little bit deeper, right? Try to understand the
Yeah.
other person's perspective. Try to understand
Yes.
why that is, right? Because in most cases, I would say there is a good reason that Amanda has her title, her credentials, all of this stuff in her email signature.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a lovely place for us to end.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda, for yet another rich and surprising conversation. We always wind up somewhere we didn't realize we'd wind up. And I think that our conversations are the better for it. And thank you to everyone for listening. And we hope that you'll join us next time when we cover another topic from the messy middle. Bye.
Bye.
If today's episode hit home or just made you laugh, you might love our merch. We've got 3 collections. Don't Make Me Regret, in honor of the sweatshirt that started it all. Words Matter, inspired by our most popular episode. And Embrace the Messy, to celebrate the beautiful chaos. Head to shop.themessymiddlematters.com to take a look. Everything's print on demand, so be sure to double check your size before ordering. But if anything goes wrong with the printing, our vendor will work with you to make it right. Looking for a different cut or size? Email us at podcast@themessymiddlematters.com so that we can explore the option. Thanks for making the messy middle matter.